Hello, fellow law nerds. Welcome to a very special episode of Boom Lawyered, a Rewire News Group podcast hosted by the legal journalism team that is recording this live at the Summit for Religious Freedom. Woo! I'm Rewire News Group's editor-at-large, Imani Gandhi.
And I'm Jess Pieklo, Rewire News Group's executive editor. Rewire News Group is the one and only home for expert repro journalism that inspires you to keep church and state separate. And the Boom Lawyered podcast is part of that mission, so a big thanks to our subscribers and welcome to our new listeners and viewers, and welcome everyone from the Summit for Religious Freedom. Thank you to Americans United for the separation of church and state for putting this conference on together and hosting us. We have so much to talk about.
So much.
So, I originally pitched this panel as how the Roberts Court is catapulting us to a theocracy. Like, that's really sexy, right? And they are, and we're definitely going to talk about that. But in the middle of the prep and all of this, a pretty important abortion rights and access case happened. And it just so happens that that case also has theocracy at its very center. So we're going to talk about it.
We are. The Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine versus the FDA. This is a ginned-up legal fight over the FDA's approval of mifepristone over 2 decades ago. Let me repeat that. Over 2 decades ago. And it's a bunch of dangerous nonsense, essentially. So let's get into that, Jess.
Okay, so let's start with who these folks are. AHM is a shadow group, basically. They were formed for the purposes of bringing this specific lawsuit.
They were formed in Tennessee. Tennessee! I mean, besides starting with T, what does Tennessee have to do with Texas?
Not much.
Not a whole lot.
They claim that the FDA rushed mifepristone to the market over 20 years ago, as we said, and you'll hear us talk about that a lot because, literally, over 20 years ago. They're bringing this challenge now. But also that each step taken since to make the drug more available has been well beyond the agency's power. Like, the FDA is acting so far out of bounds, is functionally what these groups are saying. And they claim that mifepristone is dangerous and unsafe, like, Tylenol.
Right.
Basically. But here's where the rubber really meets the road, though. They also claim that pregnancy isn't an illness and instead is a natural condition that most women, and this is a specific choice of language here because what they are trying to do is ingrain gender essentialism into the law here. But they say that pregnancy is a natural condition that most women will experience at some state in their life, and that really, no need for the FDA to take these steps.
And they're making a really big deal about this claim that, woke leftists think that pregnancy is an illness. And really, that's not relevant. That's a red herring. That's just something they say to kind of try to make fun of woke leftists. The relevant FDA regulations apply to life-threatening conditions, which pregnancy obviously is, given that the Black maternal mortality rate in this country is basically LOL, good luck.
Oh my God.
I mean, it is. They've also argued that this shadow group actually had legal standing to bring these claims because they basically have really big feelings about abortion, and abortion makes them sad. And when abortion makes you sad, you need a legal remedy.
You need a legal
remedy. You gotta
remedy.
go to court. You gotta get somebody like, Sam Alito or Matt Kacsmaryk to say, it's okay that you hate abortion. We do too.
I mean, I feel some kind of way about abortion, so I have standing.
Right, it's like I'm triggered standing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and this is the same group that if you have been following abortion rights litigation and know the Texas SB 8 law, the bounty hunter law, they brought us what we on the podcast lovingly refer to as arm standing. What's arm standing, Imani?
Arm standing is any random motherfucker standing. Basically, and I got to give a shout out to Andrea Grimes, who's a journalist and amazing woman. She's the person who came up with that phraseology. But essentially, Texas conferred standing to any random motherfucker who feels some kind of way about abortion, and that's just not what Article 3 of the Constitution contemplated. I'm pretty sure that's not what they contemplated.
I think you might be onto something there.
I might be onto something.
So this shadow group found a friend in theocrat on the bench, Kacsmaryk.
And I love the found a friend in that, Kacsmaryk, because it really does remind me of like a Randy Newman song, right? Like, you've got a friend in Matt. You've got a friend in Matt. If you get the notion that you hate abortion, you've got a friend in Matt.
Amazing. But it's true. And so Matty K, as we like to call him, because frankly, that's about the level of respect that I think he's earned on the bench so far. If you missed it, he issued the most bonkers ruling in this case. And it not only threatens mifepristone approval, but the FDA regulatory process in general by basically accepting AHM's claims almost entirely. And I just really want to reiterate that because what we are seeing from conservative legal advocacy groups in particular is a weaponizing of abortion as a way to really come after other rights and powers that they don't like. And this case is a perfect example of that.
And so then, after an emergency appeal filed by the Biden administration and drug manufacturers like Danco, the Fifth Circuit said to Matty K, hold my beer.
Truly.
And decided to really tee this issue up for the Supreme Court. The Fifth Circuit's decision put on hold part of Matty K's ruling, but accepted entirely the anti-choice advocates' position in how they read the Comstock Act, right? They are reading the Comstock Act as a federal criminal ban on mailing abortion pills.
I mean, who knew that the Grant administration was still relevant? But that's when the Comstock Act was passed.
It really is. And frankly, the Comstock Act does not prohibit the mailing of anything related to abortion, right? It prohibits the mailing of materials, devices, equipment used for illegal abortions, right? I mean, if you think about it, the FDA couldn't possibly have any sort of prosecutorial role when it comes to the Controlled Substances Act, right? Like, there are certain controlled substances that the government has said, no, you can't use them, even though the medical community uses them. Let's talk about ketamine, for example, right? Ketamine's a big party drug, so I've heard.
Rumor
it's
has it.
also something that is used for some PTSD treatments, right? Their actual mental health uses. It's also used for horses. Mm-hmm. So you can't say the FDA has some kind of prosecutorial role when it comes to ketamine just because it has some actual uses. It's ridiculous to expect the FDA to be the DOJ, is what I'm saying.
I love that on the script here, it just says, let's all do cocaine and ketamine sidebar. This is great. So maybe you heard that the Supreme Court was involved. We got an emergency petition to the Supreme Court. Justice Sam Alito, who handles cases out of the Fifth Circuit, decided to give himself a little extra time to write what was maybe the snarkiest and most bad faith dissent coming from a conservative on the bench. And wow, that's really saying something when we have Thomas and Alito up there. But he did. Thankfully, the Supreme Court has put Matty K's order on hold for a while now. So it has to go through final disposition to the Supreme Court. So either a writ that the Supreme Court will accept, or quite frankly, what my concern is a writ that they will turn away after the Fifth Circuit issues some truly bonkers ruling, which is where the case goes next. And so this case that we're talking about right now is headed down to the Fifth Circuit on expedited oral arguments that'll take place in the middle of May. Imani is conveniently overseas.
I'm going to France to see Beyonce, and Matty K is not stopping me.
I mean, right? So we find ourselves less than a year from the Supreme Court deciding Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, and for the first time in this country's history ever, taking away a fundamental right that it had previously granted. The case gets up to the Supreme Court, and it looks like they're going to step in, and then they didn't.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Honestly, I think it's because, someone came up and said, are you going to talk about how much Clarence Thomas sucks? And yes, I am a little bit right now. Because
sidebar.
I think that the Supreme Court is really under the gun when it comes to ethics right now, right? We had the reporting about how it's pretty cool that Clarence Thomas hangs out with someone who collects Nazi memorabilia and takes $500,000 vacations on his yacht. We've got revelations coming out about Matty K himself, who apparently lied and switched the names of the authors of a law review article because the law review article was trash and anti-trans and apparently he thought it was bad enough that he felt that he needed to lie about it in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So that's something. I think Roberts is probably in a position where, considering that he wanted to be the guy who sort of shored up the institutional legacy and gravitas of the Supreme Court, he has failed miserably. And I think that this case is such bullshit. The standing arguments are so absurd that perhaps maybe they want to wait for a better case so that they can kill medication abortion without looking like absolute jackasses for doing so.
Or at least wait and not do it on the shadow docket, right? I mean, I honestly think that had Sam Alito gotten his way on this petition, that we would see court reform and expansion front and center on the Democratic platform in 2024, and it would be one of the things that progressive advocacy organizations are talking the most about is the need to fix a broken judicial system. And I just don't think John Roberts wants that smoke.
No, I don't think he does either.
Yeah.
So there's been a fair amount of reporting on this case, and nearly all of the reporting has missed a couple key things. First, this case is about fetal personhood. And that's the brass ring, right? That's the next brass ring for the anti-choice movement. And second, this case will help usher in a national abortion ban. Once the case sort of meanders its way back to the Fifth Circuit, perhaps back to the district court and back up, that's what this case forebodes, a national abortion ban.
That's definitely what Aaron Hawley wants out of this. And yikes. Imani.
And who's Aaron Hawley?
Oh, Josh Hawley's wife, and one of the lead attorneys at the Alliance Defending Freedom, who is litigating this case.
And Alliance Defending Freedom, for those who haven't heard of them, although most of you probably have. I would imagine everyone has, but just in case maybe some of our virtual audience, Alliance Defending Freedom is a conservative law firm, and they are behind some of the most gross incursions of civil rights when it comes to abortion rights, when it comes to trans rights. They are essentially trying to usher in a Christo-fascist theocracy, and they've been successful at doing it so far, and so that's real concerning.
They're not even shy about it.
They're not shy about it at all. I mean, they will admit it. I mean, the Southern Poverty Law Center has categorized them as a hate group due to their actions when it comes to LGBTQ people filing lawsuits. They're terrible, needless to say.
Yeah, bad dudes all around. So what do we mean when we say that this is a personhood case? It's not even subtle. The very first footnote in Matt Kacsmaryk's opinion, and I know that there are a lot of lawyers and lawyer-adjacent people in the room and likely for the virtual audience as well, y'all understand the importance of a footnote. Right? We drop those very intentionally when we're writing, right? So Judge Kacsmaryk takes the very first opportunity in this decision to say, oh, by the way, I'm rejecting the term fetus throughout this opinion. Not going to use fetus. I don't like it. I think it's unscientific. I'm going to use unborn person and unborn human instead. Now, we'll get into some of this in a little bit, but I want to remind folks that medication abortion is typically used up to about 10 weeks of pregnancy max. So we've got that going for it. All right. Now, that footnote is catnip for people like Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas.
It is catnip for them, and I just want to reiterate that he dropped in a footnote that the word fetus is unscientific. Let's just let that sit for a while. The word fetus is unscientific.
Breathe it in.
Breathe it out. Hold
Breathe it out.
Breathe it out.
But it really is. And accepting AHM's theory that mifepristone is dangerous is only dangerous if you accept that it's the fetus at the center of it, right? Because the science is overwhelming that mifepristone is safe and effective. But Judge Kacsmaryk's opinion talks about the dangers of mifepristone to the unborn human.
Baby. Right.
The preborn.
The preborn humans. It's It's truly absurd if you think about it. There's something like 5.6 million medication abortions that have occurred over the last 23 years. There have been 28 recorded deaths. Some of those deaths may not even be due specifically to the mifepristone. So mifepristone is obviously not dangerous unless you're Maddie K and you count the 5.6 million abortions as something that's dangerous, right? So mifepristone doing what it does has killed 5.6 million babies, and that's why we're here, essentially.
And the argument that ADF is making, that pregnancy isn't an illness that requires medical intervention via abortion, like, sit with that for a second. That's dangerous because, I don't know, good luck treating that life-threatening pregnancy, right? It's in God's hands is the position that they are arguing and that is now getting ingrained into constitutional law.
And another thing that they're arguing, which is absolutely mind-boggling, is that medication abortion serves no therapeutic benefit over the alternative. The alternative is surgery. It's procedural abortion. So they're trying to argue that these 5.6 million abortions that have taken place before 10 weeks are somehow, there's no benefit to those over the abortions that would have otherwise occurred, which are procedural abortions. And Jess loves to talk about the reason why they're trying to push people into procedural abortions. I'm going to let her talk about that right now.
It's the punishment, obviously, right? The conservative legal movement wants to make accessing fundamental health care generally, but reproductive health care specifically, inconvenient, expensive, dangerous, and funneled into religious social services institutions. This is about breaking a lot of public institutions and using abortion as one means to do it, right? As Adam Sewer has been, coined during the Trump administration, the cruelty is the point. The cruelty is absolutely the point here. I mean, it's a good thing if people die in childbirth, according to the religious right. Yeah. That's where we're at. And that, my friends, is how fetal personhood gets ingrained in the law.
And this is not accidental, right? One of the cases that Maddie K cites in his opinion is the prosecution of Purvi Patel.
Oh, God.
Purvi Patel was a woman in Indiana who had a pregnancy loss, went into a hospital, and at the hospital, the healthcare workers snitched on her. So she was in the hospital having this pregnancy loss, dealing with the aftermath of this pregnancy loss. The police show up, grab her cell phone, start rifling through her text messages. The doctor themselves, and I'd forgotten this until Jess reminded me of this, and I actually wrote about it, but I've been writing so many things about these cases, you sometimes forget.
And this case was a while ago.
This is when
Mike Pence was in Indiana so long ago.
Yeah, that is a long time ago. One of her doctors went dumpster diving to try and look for the quote-unquote preborn human to be used as evidence. And it gets even more bizarre. During her trial, they used this unscientific method called the float test, right? They had to try to figure out if the baby had taken a breath after it had been born. So what do? You inflate the lungs to see if they float. I mean, it's essentially...
Is she a witch?
Right, it's exactly what it is. We're going back to Salem witch trial times here, where we're trying to figure out if the lungs are floating, then she's a witch who had an abortion and must be punished. And she was sentenced to something like 41 years. 41 years, some of it was concurrent, so I think it was a 20-year sentence, which she eventually pled out. And so she didn't serve any time besides the time that she was in jail waiting for all of this to be dealt with. But I mean, this is the sort of malevolence that we're dealing with here. And that's the sort of also malevolence that we're dealing with in the healthcare industry, right? If you are a religious person and you work in the healthcare industry, then you can go ahead and snitch on the people who you don't like, snitch on the people who may have made a decision about their bodily autonomy that you don't agree with.
And I just really want to drive home the fact that the state of Indiana was willing to sentence this woman to, 20 to 40 functionally for a pregnancy loss. And here we are now with Judge Kacsmaryk using that prosecution as evidence that women and people who become pregnant can't be trusted to manage their own pregnancies and abortions.
Right, absolutely.
Oh, that's some rough stuff. Well, the good news is the case isn't before the Supreme Court right now. The bad news is it's before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they're going to take a whack at it including the Comstock Act claim, which we are already seeing anti-choice advocates try and use in other litigation to come after states that have passed proactive protections around access to abortion and contraception. Jonathan Mitchell, our friend who came up with arm standing that we referred to earlier, has filed a lawsuit in New Mexico challenging an ordinance there and arguing that the Comstock Act is an avenue to go in and undercut state protections on abortion rights. So this isn't a coincidence. It is a coordinated campaign.
Yeah, I mean, they were going to throw it back to the states. Remember that old chestnut?
Throw it back to hot mic. Throw it back to the states and the electeds, because Sam Alito, big fan of democracy right there.
Oh yeah,
huge fan. Okay, so we hit through some of personhood. Imani, how does this case tee us up for a possible national ban?
Well, in a couple of ways. If plaintiffs really get their way here, ultimately, mifepristone approval will be withdrawn, and the drug theoretically comes off the market, right? Even in blue states and states that have some kind of legal abortion remaining. So that's a de facto national ban, right? Jess called it on Twitter a low-key 7-week ban, because that's what it is. There are still some states that permit the use of mifepristone for off-label use, but essentially what this case could end up as is a national 7-week abortion ban.
I mean, if you take away medication abortion, then you are, forcing folks to not only carry pregnancies, but those who do end up having any ability to access abortion care beyond that are in later abortions. Good luck in most states accessing that. And importantly, and I think this is one thing that I haven't seen talked about enough in the media and in the legal commentary around this current campaign, again, because I'm using that word intentionally, this is a campaign. They are using the courts to do what they can't get done otherwise through a democratic process. It moves the Overton window, right? Because now suddenly there's a national conversation, whether it's in good faith or not, around the quote unquote safety of abortion after 6 weeks. It's ginned up controversy designed to get folks who aren't plugged in the way that folks at this conference are, the folks who are attending virtually. It's to get them to just not understand, right? Create chaos and confusion. I mean, even Alito's dissent was like, it's fine if we just go back to 2016, which is which is functionally what one of the options was with the FDA approval, because, I mean, what's that going to change that much? It would have changed everything. Like, the mifepristone in the market right now would not have been able to be distributed because it would have been labeled wrong. And the manufacturers were like, guys?
Yeah, and it would have been essentially also a trial balloon, right? Like, think of the leak of the Dobbs opinion, right? It leaked May of last year, a good 2 months before the actual opinion dropped. And it gave people time to sort of get mad about it. And then I think the hope was that they would stop being as mad. So 2 months would pass. And by the time the Dobbs decision actually dropped, they would have already been used to it. I think the same thing applies here, right? If you just roll back the FDA regulations to the 2016 levels, where you cannot get an abortion up to 10 weeks, you have to stop at 7, where you have to go in person to get it dispensed, you can't get it mailed or through telehealth, that sort of gives the country, gives advocates, gives people a way to get used to that regime, so that it doesn't seem so obnoxious when the ultimate decision comes down that, that's how we're going to keep it. We're going to keep it at these 2016 levels. That rolls back access. That is not something that's good, but it's less bad than completely disapproving it or withdrawing authorization.
And it's so cynical too, because then the anti-choice community can use it as a way to sort of cover their own asses, right? To say, well, look, I mean, the FDA says 6 weeks, so who are we to argue with the government agency, even though that's exactly what they're doing, is arguing with the government agency this entire time. So it's wild. And I saw a lot of commentary last night around the Supreme Court's decision to, let the litigation proceed in terms of like, this is going to be great, guys. It was 7-2. Like, obviously this bodes well, and I need folks to take a breath and maybe take a walk outside and reconsider who is still on the bench. Because if you're going to tell me that Justice Amy Coney Barrett is going to be like, oh yes, I love medication abortion. She's not,
No.
right?
No.
Like she is absolutely not. Or Justice Kavanaugh, who any single time has had an abortion rights case come before the court, has let the clock run out in his analysis, right? Do you remember the Garza case?
Do I remember the Garza case? Yeah, the case where they essentially held an undocumented minor hostage in a detention center and refused to let her go and get an abortion, even though under Texas law, where the detention center was, she'd already gone through the legal rigmarole, through the judicial bypass, went to the court took a look at her, said, yeah, sure, you're mature enough to, they do that thing where they look at you and say, well, you're too immature to get an abortion, but I guess you're mature enough to raise a kid. Well, this girl actually got permission from the state of Texas to get an abortion, and Justice Kavanaugh said, wait a minute, let's slow your roll. We're not gonna let, I mean, that's just, the man can't be trusted. And so when I see people potentially arguing that maybe he might side with, a medication abortion,
yeah,
I really have to ask you to go outside and just maybe breathe some fresh air.
Breathe some fresh air.
Right?
And I mean, Justice Gorsuch, Imani and I conveniently have managed to bookend Justice Gorsuch in Colorado.
Yeah, he lives about exactly
midway
halfway
between our two houses. We didn't plan it that way, but it sure is.
We've
fun
got
how
him
it worked
surrounded,
out.
is what we're saying.
Right, glitter bombs. But like, where's Justice Gorsuch going to land on this case? Imani, riddle me this.
God, it's not good. It's not good.
So that's why I do think, the court punted. I honestly think Alito was trying to scare up a couple extra votes, which is why he gave himself a little more time. And then when he couldn't get it, just got mad.
He got very mad.
And sassy. Mm-hmm. The ladies on the court were saying things he didn't agree with.
Right.
It's bad. And Joe Biden wasn't going to abide by the law, which, I mean, as though that's not intentional to undercut everything. It's not great, Bob.
It's not great, Bob.
It's not great, but like we said, the good news is the court didn't take the case for now. The storm clouds are forming, though, and the Comstock Act is not anything that I thought I would be talking about 10 plus years into my career as a legal journalist for real. Like, it's an academic exercise. But here we are. It's suddenly a very live thing that the anti-choice community in particular sees as a very important weapon in their arsenal. And it's an important weapon in their arsenal for their fight against birth control too, because Jess and I have been saying for years they're coming for birth control, and one of the Comstock Act is what was used, for example, to put Margaret Sanger in jail when she was spreading the birth control word back in the 1920s. So I think we can expect that sort of carceral response to come back in vogue. I just had a flash of a Thomas opinion.
Oh God, I don't even want to think about it.
A concurrence or a dissent that absolutely manages to talk about Comstock Act, Margaret Sanger.
And how Margaret Sanger was essentially in the basement of every black family trying to eradicate black people. I mean, that is something they will never stop lying about, and that is not true. Margaret Sanger was wildly ableist. She was not this grand racist who was trying to use abortion or birth control to decimate the black community. But, the religious right, they love to pretend to care about black babies when it suits their purpose. But they don't really care about black babies. And I think we all in this room know that.
It is a wild time.
It's a wild time.
So wild, in fact, I'm going to start to close on one story because I imagine that folks in this room and virtually don't get some of the press releases that I get from the anti-choice community. And so one of the things that we are seeing, right, and this isn't just left to the abortion and repro spaces, but is a full reclaiming of a lot of concepts and framings that progressives have made good progress on. And so now you should all know that the anti-choice community is very concerned about environmental racism.
Oh, of course they are.
Students for Life has an FDA petition that they are filing that is claiming that there is massive environmental damage due to abortion pill runoff functionally in our water supply.
I mean, just to say it is to recognize its absurdity, right?
This is my face it's doing some things in response to that kind of claim. But
it's hysteria, right? The water is an abortifacient, is essentially what they're trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of our tech team here, I was reading the petition and the press release to the whole crew because I had to just share it, right? I can't keep that to myself when you're reading it. And one of the members of our tech team was like, well, yeah, it's, you know, the water's making the frogs gay. Patrick, that was very good. I mean, it is functionally where we're at. But so a place where up is down, left is right, and faith is science, and science does not matter, is where the anti-choice community is taking us. And unfortunately, there seems to be a conservative majority on the Supreme Court that is willing to go along with that. And when they get the opportunity to impose that view, they will. I mean, we don't talk about Dobbs as a theocratic decision enough, but it is. If you look at the folks who were cited in the majority opinion by Alito, whether they're legal scholars or theologians, it's a very particular view of faith and who participates. And that's one of the things that Imani and I talk about on the podcast a lot, is that this push by the conservative legal movement is really about erasing folks from the full civic, or their ability to fully participate in civic life. And that is why it is a full frontal assault, you know, on our bodies, our ballots, our rights. Yep. Yep. Well, that was a fucking grim note to close on.
Let's take some questions.
Yes, but we are gonna wrap up the show portion of this because we do want to leave time. Imani, this is the first time that Imani and I have been in front of an audience like this with the podcast. So thank you all in person and virtually for going through and getting to see some of the show that we absolutely just adore and love. 6 seasons.
6 seasons, 200. This is our 201st episode. Oh. This was going to be our 200th, but then the Supreme Court screwed it up for us.
Yeah,
so.
Way to go, Sam Alito. Thanks
Sam.
A lot. Actually, we could probably find a way to get mad at Anthony Kennedy about that. If we
I'm
really
still
tried.
Mad at Anthony
Still
Kennedy.
Mad, Tony.
That's
still
a
mad.
podcast topic for another time.
It is another time. But we do want to wrap up and leave some questions, and also because we realized that we talked about a case that was different than what we were originally, coming here to talk about. I was like, we'll do some big sweeping thing, and then I was like, nope, we are talking about abortion, which we do all the time and love and think everybody should talk about abortion all the time. But thank you.
Thank you so much.
This has been a blast. We are actually releasing this episode on Monday, so if you don't know the Boom Lawyer podcast, please subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts. I'm stepping on your lines.
It's okay. It's okay. You're doing them well. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we're everywhere. We're everywhere you want to be. We also have a video. We're also on video now, so if you subscribe to youtube.com/Rewire News Group, you can get notifications when we go live. Especially as what we like to call sweaty SCOTUS season begins, we'll be doing live streams in response to the big cases. So for example, when Clarence Thomas, who benefited from affirmative action, decides that nobody else should and rules that way in the Harvard case, we'll be on live talking about that.
I cannot wait to see what Sam Alito has to say about 303 Creatives and the woman who doesn't create websites for gay couples.
But she might.
Someday.
And so she has standing because she might someday. I mean, it's just, this season is going to be sweaty. That's why we call it Sweaty SCOTUS season, quite frankly.
But thank you so much. We are being pulled off by our producer because, like I said, if you give lawyers and journalists a mic, we will not shut up. Yeah. So thank you sincerely.
Thank you very much.